I'm sorry, there was a glitch and I had to stop the other recording and pick back up, so I apologize that this might be in two sections. Okay, uh, but getting back to what I was saying about magic, it's basically magic comes from an old word that means a trick or a device used for a shortcut. And the way that the word comes to us is we originally called the people the Magi, who were, the priests and the wise men of Persia. We called them the Magi because they had all of these tricks and these devices and these ways of studying and explaining and taking advantage of their knowledge of nature to change the courses of rivers and to predict eclipses and to do all this kind of stuff. Interestingly enough, magic and machine come from the same word, right? Magic and machine derive from the same word. They both actually mean a trick or a device for solving a problem. So you have different kinds of magic, and this magic gives forth different kinds of machines. Then you have different kinds of machines which often look to us like magic. So a lot of what Tony Stark or Iron Man says in those Marvel movies is true, that magic is just science we don't understand yet. So that's just based on the fact that magic and machine itself, right? Mechanics is the system or the trick or the device that allows something to run and do what it does. So this notion of machine, magic, mechanics, magic, it's all interconnected. So you can have different kinds of magic. The one kind of magic is sympathetic magic, which would be like if you want it to rain, then you wet a cloth and you sling it over your head while you say an incantation, and as the water from the wet cloth begins to fling everywhere, that kind of reminds nature it's not doing its job and it needs to rain. Or you can have a kind of what's called imaginative magic, which would be where you actually attempt to use your will to curse or control other people and to make the world bend to the way you think that it should look. And so it's a kind of coercion. And you can have fetishes that you utilize in different magical performances. Oddly enough, we would call the fetish of the magician always having a top hat or always having a wand, right? The stage magician. But then also we think of wizards or whatever in popular culture, and they always have staves and long, tall staffs, and they all have long beards or craggly hair, and they wear weird robes and things like that. And or if you think about Harry Potter, not to give any more free press to J.K. Rowling, but if you think about Harry Potter, there's so many fetishes that are made use of in there, right? There's the sorting hat, and there's, every wizard has a wand and things like that. So all of these ideas are still there, and they're still operative in our popular culture. And so even our understanding of magic is actually, I think it's a lot more profound than most people give it credit for. Among the different ways that certain kinds of aspects of society are, of a culture with the sacred tradition, that people know certain things are off limits is because of the creation of the taboo, which is a Polynesian word. Taboo means something to be avoided by the unordained, right? So something is taboo to people who are not specifically chosen to handle that thing, because the taboo is a sort of mark of something extraordinary. So a person has to be more than ordinary in order to interact with it. So this actually goes so far back in so many different ways. Only members of a certain mystery cult could enter into their sacred precincts. The high priest of Israel could only go into the tabernacle of the Lord behind into the sacred space where the Ark of the Covenant was actually kept. Can only go back there once a year, and they had to be purified. And if they weren't particularly purified, or if there was something wrong, or that person wasn't supposed to be the high priest, they would automatically die or be cursed, or something horrible would happen. So you're not supposed to touch anything unless you're prepared for it, right? And this is actually still alive in a lot of different ways. I mean, on the whole, it's taboo for some. It's taboo for in most Protestant religions and all Catholic and Orthodox religions. It's taboo for someone besides an ordained minister or priest to perform certain functions inside the church. That also means touching certain things, right? And then a person can have a kind of, so that when you think about that, a person can develop a sort of sacredness around them, which is, which you see this sort of thing operative like with the Pope or with the president, or with any of these kind of figures. You see it's still operative in the everyday world that we exist in today. It's not just something that had to do with older religious structures, or structures outside of the great civilizations. And then we kept alive as well all these different kinds of rites of passage, though I would say that a lot that's happened in the West has been sort of an attempt to rediscover new rites of passage, or to rewrite the old rites of passage to be more inclusive. But a lot of this has occurred because people get confused about the fact that these rites of passage are, in some senses, they're important for everybody, the society, the individuals involved, and all of that, marking certain important crossings of the line, crossings and boundaries of a person, that says, I'm no longer a child, now I'm an adult, I'm no longer, that's a bar mitzvah, or confirmation, or when the child is born and they're circumcised, or they're baptized, or even nowadays the way they do the cutting of the umbilical cord at hospitals and in the workshops of doulas, the delivery spaces of doulas, and in pediatric wards and hospitals, when you cut the umbilical cord, that's a rite of passage in a sense. That's the one that, for people who won't baptize a baby and maybe won't circumcise a child, that's a okay, this shows that you've been cut out of the mother. You're now your own person, right? And then, of course, there's all these different sorts of ways that we have of dealing with, coming into puberty, and what happens when a person enters puberty. When I was growing up, 6th grade, which would be the year that most kids go through puberty, was actually done at a school. The only people going to that school were 6th graders. And then there's another few years later, the only people going to the school were 9th graders. And both of these, in a sense, are secularizations of liminal rites of passage, right? So you sequester the kids going through puberty into one school. And then after the kids have gotten a little bit older and they're beginning to look more like adults, even if they're still acting a little bit like children, you put them into this sort of 9th grade academy, and that's going to be, okay, now you got to get serious. You're fixing to enter into a higher school, high school, and you'll be a sophomore, junior, senior, graduate. So all of these kinds of things themselves are, rituals, social structures that help us denote the time that people, or the passages of time people are going through. So there's all kinds of other ones. When you graduate from college, there's going to be lots of symbolism. Maybe you won't understand the symbolism, but I advise you figure out what all these symbols are. Why do you wear a mortarboard? Why do you wear a sash? Why do you wear a robe? Why do you wear, that little dangly tassel? Why do you wear all that stuff? That's a hark back to the Middle Ages, when all universities were controlled, and all universities in Western Europe were controlled by the Catholic Church. Right? So interestingly enough, a lot of the symbolism in academics is just taken wholesale from Catholicism. So anyway, so you graduate from college, there'll be something. When you get married, even if you go to a justice of the peace, there'll be some sort of ceremony. Certain anniversary celebrations at work or in your relationships or your birthdays, are important and deserve special treatment, right? Your 40th birthday, your 50th birthday, 25th anniversary, 50th anniversary, when you retire at work, those kinds of things. And then, of course, when people pass away or die, when they go on to the next phase of being, we have developed rituals to send them off. I would make the argument that our rituals have become fairly profane in the United States, but, it's still a ritual. Okay, so with that, I've kind of walked you through the basic highlights of this chapter. Read the chapter. Don't just use this little wandering through PowerPoint to try to, skip having to read the text. Read the text. Do your assignments. Remember that I think that everything in the chapter is due as far as assignments are concerned by Friday at 11:59 p.m. Okay? All right. I look forward to talking to y'all sometime this week, I hope.